asking me to be the keynote speaker for this year's symposium. This is my very first time not only coming to Denver, but also doing the GBS and CIDP symposium. And it's wonderful to meet so many people who have the same story that's similar to mine. Back home, I've been in several support groups where there were spinal cord injuries, but there's nothing quite like this that I've experienced. So I'm on the vent today because the elevation is getting to me a little bit, but it shouldn't hinder what I'm going to speak with you guys today. So I'm going to speak about some boundaries, not only for what I draw for myself, but what I encourage you guys to draw for yourself. This is me 2 years before band geek. Really big into marching band. It was my whole personality. I played the trombone for about 4 years. I was also the drum major at my band in my high school, so I was used to leading a group of like 50 or 60 people. And that was a big part of my identity, not only of being a leader, but sometimes even a volunteer. The next picture is me 2 weeks before I got diagnosed. I went to Hawaii to live with my aunt for about 2 months, and it was beautiful, so relaxing. I mean, it's the ocean, it's the island, and the Hawaiian aloha. During the last, is it showing the pictures? Okay. So during the last 2 days before I was going to fly home, I started feeling like weird, big headaches, and Tylenol didn't do anything. I was really worried about my flight. I didn't want to be in Hawaii before I could reach home and get help from either like my doctor or seeing urgent care. So when I was at the airport, I was throwing up and laughing and crying at the same time. My body felt like it was fighting something, but my mind couldn't understand what it was just yet. It wasn't a fever, it wasn't like a flu. It was something different, and I felt it in my bones. When I got home, I took a nap for 2 hours, and that's when I woke up with half of my face paralyzed. I told my mom, and she's had a history of being in the medical field, so she thought it was Bell's palsy. We didn't go to the ER right away, since if it was just the face, Bell's palsy is just gonna work through its own gradually. It wasn't until nighttime when I couldn't eat. I couldn't hold down what I wanted to eat. I was having loss of consciousness, kind of in and out of where I was presently at. And when I was trying to tie my hair up, that was when my left arm was flaccid. It was weak. My dad was really worried, so my parents decided to take me to the ER. We got to the ER at 12 a.m., but I didn't get seen until 3. And I think a lot of you understand that your timing in the ER is very crucial. I did blood work, tests. They thought it was Zika virus. They thought it was West Nile, but the doctors couldn't pinpoint exactly what was happening with me. That was until a neurologist, he came forward and told me that it was Guillain-Barré syndrome. And I've never heard of it before. I Googled stroke, but it wasn't stroke. And that was when he started saying all the symptoms that would possibly happen within the course of 1 or 2 weeks, maybe even a couple of days. The next was go, go, go. Gotta be quick in order to treat each symptom. By the time I was in the ICU and I was already hypoxic, they put me on they put me actually on the breathing tube that was in my mouth, and I was in a coma that was medically induced by then. So when I started my IVIG treatment, I didn't realize that I was doing 5 rounds. I didn't get to know what it felt like. When I woke up, I was already transferred to another hospital. In neuro ICU, there were medications already being given to me through IV, and it wasn't just 1 or 2, it was 4. And I hated needles. Luckily, I was in a coma, so I didn't feel when they gave the needles then. But waking up with the tubes on my arms, on my neck, it was a lot to process. I was 19 at the time. I was a college student. I was 1 week ahead of going back to start my 2nd year, studying at UCI. I was even in their honors program. There was a lot that I had on my plate. I didn't think about getting better. I thought about what I had to do to be able to make it back to where I was. So I spent time at a step down, and I felt like since there was so much chaos happening, I didn't have boundaries, or I didn't get to have a say in what I wanted to happen. I mean, there was a breathing tube in my mouth. I couldn't really vocalize. So the best next thing was to blink with the one good eye that I had and to raise my eyebrow. That was the only way I communicated. Luckily, there were great occupational and physical therapists who were very passionate about what happened to me. They brought their students, and I was even comfortable to allow them to work on me because GBS is so rare. And the doctor also told me that I had AMAN, acute motor axonal neuropathy, which is a different variant. So I felt my senses, but my diaphragm was shot, my arms were already gone, and I was still bedbound for a good 2 to 3 weeks. In the picture, you see the physical therapist working with me, and she was a great partner throughout all of this. Reassured me that if I didn't feel okay, I didn't have to push myself for the day. I had to be very honest about how I felt, because if they want to help you, you have to help them by being honest about where you're at, where your body's at. You can try to sugarcoat how you feel to either seem strong or to not hide your pain or your weakness, but they're there to help you. And I appreciate all the medical professionals here today who are joining us with this symposium. I moved to rehab, and I was there for 2 months. I spent Thanksgiving there, and it was pretty sad. I think I got my turkey meal in a styrofoam box. If you see there, I'm trying to play piano because, again, I was really focused on going back to what I used to love, which was music. At this point, I had already dropped out of school. I had to leave the 4-year university that I worked really hard to get to in high school. That's why I did band, that's why I did all these clubs. So I was back to step 1, starting from scratch. Oh, there's me with the cucumbers. Gotta relax some way. I was letting the chaos happen. Without new boundaries, I had a hard time finding who I was as a person with a disability. I was 19, I was young. I did have ableism thoughts for myself. I told myself I didn't want to be in a wheelchair, I didn't want the trach, I didn't want all these things happening to me, I wanted to be normal. That did not allow me to have room to give grace for myself. So I wanted to define boundaries before we get a little bit into my boundaries. Boundaries are the invisible lines or limits that individuals establish to protect their physical, emotional, and mental well-being. I've known that on social media or through conversation that boundaries are what you can uphold within a relationship with either your significant other or your family members. Oftentimes, you fail to realize that you can also hold boundaries within yourself. What is okay, what is not okay. Timing is a big one for me. I thought I had to reach a certain point within a certain time because many doctors told me that I had 1 year left to make as much change as possible before I became stagnant. So that was when I had a lack of boundaries. The times I felt lost the most were a product of me not accepting that I was starting from scratch. I felt like a baby again. I had to learn how to eat, how to swallow. My mom and my dad, they fed me. I had to get dressed. I had to get bathed. It was very vulnerable, dare I say, kind of intrusive on your individuality. And during those moments, I didn't speak up. When I was uncomfortable or fatigued, or I didn't feel safe with myself. I remember I was at the mall with my family, and I was practicing how to walk. My family was excited for me to try something new because at that point, I went from bedbound to walking within a couple of months, so they were very hopeful. They asked me, let's try the escalator. I felt it in my chest, that anxious feeling, that deep pressure. I didn't speak up. I felt hesitant, but I wanted to prove to them and make them proud. So I went on the escalator, and it was the most excruciating experience where I felt like I wanted to crawl out of my skin. I felt very unsafe, out of balance. Yes, I could hold on to my sisters, but the escalator, I went downwards. I didn't know if I was going to fall forward or if I was going to buckle my knee and fall. I know that my family was always there, but what about myself? I couldn't be there for myself. And from that, there were many instances where I had low confidence in my choices because the rug was pulled from under me. And I'm pretty sure most of you felt the same, where choices were made for you. People spoke for you, or there were actions done where they were taking place in front of you and you couldn't do anything. It was out of your control. I know when I was back in rehab, she was a great physical therapist, but when I was calling her name, she kind of pointed in my face, or she signaled, be quiet in my face. And the fact that I couldn't smack her hand out of the way, it made me very frustrated. And I didn't communicate that with her either, that I don't like being pointed or people pointing directions in my face. It's intrusive to me. So I started establishing boundaries for myself. And I've said this multiple times before in my other speeches. I have to build confidence in my choices, and that includes speaking up. I have to choose what is right for me within this moment. I got an email from a professor when I was in college, and he said, if you don't have the aptitude to be in this class, I suggest you leave it. And aptitude, that was such a heavy word. Mind you, this is a professor I've worked with for 2 semesters. I've given him my accessibility documents for 2 semesters, and he said that in an email. I stood my ground. I created a boundary that I didn't want that to take place and not be okay and not be allowed. So I emailed my accessibility counselor, and we all got into a group to talk about this, talk about where I felt that word and that language wasn't right for my instance. And I hope with that it helped bring awareness that with teachers and professors, what you say matters. I created a new list of aspirations. Back when I was in the hospital bed, I had a list: go back to school, graduate, get a job, get married, maybe have a kid. But now that list looks so different. Now it's go shopping with my mom without the wheelchair, go crocheting with my best friend, try something new without being too scared but asking for the support, like checking out this arcade where it's a lot of people. There were these things that I wanted to try in life that were goals for me, that were small. To others, they were small. But to me, they were meaningful, they were important, they were a part of building my courage and my stamina and my story. And that's when I realized that there's a constant evolution for my boundaries. One day you can feel like you don't want to try something. The next day you're ready to step out of bounds. And you can always go back. You don't have to feel strong all the time. You can have your feelings of anger, of sadness. You can talk about it and you can keep it to yourself. It's important to have these boundaries and have them adapt because that's what life is about. That's what makes you a human being. You can adapt to things. As I gradually became a little more confident that, okay, this is what I wanted to do, this is where I can travel for the day, I started branching out into getting back into that volunteer mindset because I wanted to give back to my community, but I wanted to do it in a safe way where I could reach others and still not push myself to the point of fatigue. So the first picture is at USC. I was a patient volunteer. I was there for students to practice one of their finals to come up with a care plan for my case. I worked with the same physical therapist that we saw in the previous picture who helped me walk. And from there, I built a relationship with USC. I also participated in their DPT program, or their doctorate physical therapy program, to be the case that students learn when they learn about GBS. I tried my best to bring up all the details that I learned through my experience so that future healthcare professionals can learn from essentially a GBS patient, not just a straight textbook from observers. The middle picture was my very first, and unfortunately only, chapter meeting in Los Angeles way before COVID started. This was 2019. There I met Estelle, and I remember I was 20 at the time. She handed me a pamphlet for young adults, and I'm pretty sure I wasn't supposed to take it home, but I did. That was really fun. I actually met Dr. Lewis, who's also speaking today, and he gave great reassurance and pointers for other GBS patients. I also met those with CIDP for the first time. There was a young man that I met who I learned about his story living in a rural area, and him being homeschooled meant that he was far away from other infusion facilities, and that was when I learned that you can receive IVIG also at home with a health nurse or when you're trained to do it yourself. The last picture is when I did something that was incredibly something I haven't done before. I did a TED Talk. What I spoke about in my TED Talk are things to be attentive to when you're mindful. A lot of what I brought up was my anger. One of those times was when I got angry at my mom. It wasn't her fault, it was just I had lack of patience, and her being able to take care of me after leaving her job and taking care of me full-time was a sacrifice that I couldn't even imagine doing. And when I get upset, I tend to forget about that sacrifice. So I spoke about that in my TED Talk, that her fatigue and our frustrations can't be taken to heart. We're both grieving, essentially, not only my past life, but we're grieving this life that we're taking day by day now. I went to school, finally, at Cal State Long Beach, and that was always a dream of mine since I was a little girl, to get my college degree. And with the CSULB, Cal State University Long Beach, their accessibility program was exactly what I needed to succeed. They had text-to-speech books. They scanned my books. They asked other students to take notes for me when I couldn't keep up with the pace. They also allowed me to have time for myself if I needed to step out of class or if I needed to take a break within each test. And I spoke about these experiences. I spoke at a Cal State-wide conference for mental health, and I spoke about the compromise between body and mind. Your body can not be ready to take charge at the moment, but your mind has all these ideas. And I learned from that sometimes taking a notebook and jotting my ideas down is just as productive as completing a task. In the middle picture, I stood up for myself and I laid down a boundary that theme parks should allow individuals with disabilities to get accessible services. This is a very famous theme park with a very famous mouse, I'll say. They denied me their accessibility services after they changed them. They didn't allow any physical disabilities, or even me with a trach, to get the DAS pass. And I wasn't the only one. There were adults, children, and teenagers with different symptoms and different illnesses. They had cancer, they had diabetes, so they have weakness and kind of, they were fragile or sensitive to the sun, I should say. I don't want to speak incorrectly for them. So I made a video. And I made sure in my video I was very frank that one, they changed their accessibility services to no longer support those that the program is intended to support. And two, I made a call to action for Disney and for others to speak up about their interview being declined, and for Disney to change or come up with a new idea. Well, when I posted that, it got 2.6 million views, and that attention kind of sparked dominoes for other people to start posting on social media or come together. There's also this support group where they try to defend the old accessibility program at that theme park and try to raise awareness to executives, to people higher up, maybe even government officials. This act of speaking up eventually brought me to Capitol Hill, and I was with the foundation at the time. We spoke about IVIG and allowing it to be home infusions for those under Medicare, and it was a bill. And I know that I don't have CIDP, so I didn't speak about my experiences, but I did speak about my friend that I mentioned earlier, and his home infusions, and him being a rural area and how important it was. So all this public speaking, it kind of got the gears rolling. I had a lot of spotlights on me where I was posted on USA Today. I was interviewed for my school newspaper, and I even shared my experience through my own personal website. And this was all because I decided that I didn't want to hold myself back anymore. You all have a story you can tell. And it's just a matter of looking if you want to cross that boundary to do so, to start branching out. So let's take a look at the space between boundaries. It's like a magnifying glass, or I tried my best. These are what I asked myself, but the space between boundaries is different for everyone, because I can't understand what each of you go through that's different than mine. So what I tell myself is, will I feel safe moving forward, speaking up for myself, speaking with families and colleagues about how I feel? Can I make adjustments where if it's not working for today, am I okay with holding back? And do I trust myself? Do I trust myself to do this? Do I trust myself to share this? Do I trust myself to go to this place? Take a moment and think about your boundaries. What are you okay with and not okay with? when it comes to your disability, because disability is not a one-size-fits-all. Do you often speak up about how you feel to your care partners, to your family or your friends? And how long did it take for you to learn that boundary? And what makes it important for you? Defining, strengthening, and adjusting your boundaries takes time, patience, and dedication. With time, you will learn what's just right for you, but you have to be patient that sometimes it won't work. You have to be dedicated that you have to keep trying and trying again. Be aware that there's power in standing by what you choose for your boundaries and making new decisions. I'd also like to note that make your support system know why you have these boundaries and why you have these choices. Communicating your perspective opens the floor to what works for everyone. I tell my mom that I like to be showered a certain way, but of course, she has her own physical limits, and she doesn't want to push herself. So to make it safe for all of us, we come up with a routine. We bring in a shower chair, or we have certain shower tools to make it right. Kind of like a middle ground or a compromise. What does my life look like now after kind of catapulting into being a personal disability advocate and being a public speaker? I'm currently just having fun. I do go to that theme park, and I've stood my ground and fought to get the accessibility services. So it's not just theme parks that I explore and post on my social media. I also explore different concert venues. I like to see either like Taylor Swift, Ariana Grande. This concert was actually a rave, and I've never been to a rave before. I speak up about these accessibility options so that my colleagues, and a lot of them who have GBS are my age, they can also access these. And of course, I always grow, and I always share my love of being alive with my family. I think a lot of people have spoken up, especially yesterday, about taking things for granted before and how getting GBS or CIDP has changed your outlook on life. I think that's so crucial to sharing with your loved ones, because what other perspective comes genuinely from you that you would want to share with others? It's honest, it's raw. Even sometimes when I don't feel like sharing my emotions, I try to communicate it in a way where I feel safe enough to only share some details with my sisters. Your support system is incredibly important. And you don't even have to find that in family. I've also found it in friends, the friends I've had in high school and band. I've also found it in support groups and even online, where I've never met a person physically, and they are in a separate country, but checking up on each other is what brings me joy. For the future, I hope to see more change and more growth in our community. But I also hope to make change and create growth for myself. And a big part of me being here is going to be the gas for that. So I ask, what do you see for the future? We are here together in the symposium with so many resources and so many opportunities. This is your chance to find your boundaries, learn about what you want to do, learn about what you don't want to do, and sometimes making that boundary that if you're feeling like this is a lot, to take a step back, to take a breather. This whole event is catered for us, and this whole community understands each other. And I'm excited to see what this future and what the future research and what this weekend holds. So thank you.